parents and sister turned my daughter away on Christmas. No room at the table, they said. So I evicted them from the $250,000 home I paid for. At Christmas, I was working a double shift at the emergency room. My parents and sister informed my 16-year-old daughter that there was no place for her at the table. She had to drive home alone and celebrate Christmas in an empty house. I didn't create a scene. Instead, I took action. The next morning, my parents discovered a note at their door and screamed. On Christmas Eve, I arrived home about 11:45 p.m., completely exhausted. I'd done compressions on a man who claimed he was simply fatigued. He was also blue. That type of change. So when I spotted Sophie's boots near the entryway, my initial assumption was that someone was bleeding. Then I noticed her coat drooping against the armrest, her overnight bag still zipped, and her curled up on the couch in that tight, unnatural sleep position, as if she didn't trust the furniture. I waited there waiting for reasoning to catch up. She was meant to attend my folks' overnight tradition. She begged to drive herself only once, proud of her recently acquired license. She even departed early to be extra courteous. My husband and I were both working late nights, so the plan seemed reasonable, until it didn't. Sophie, I spoke softly. She opened her eyes immediately, like if she hadn't truly slept. Hey, why are you here? She sat up gently. They said there wasn't room. I blinked. Where is the room? At the table. Her voice broke midway through. She attempted to disguise it with another shrug. Did not work. They said they didn't expect me, and that there were already too many people. Grandma explained that she couldn't simply pull up another chair at the last minute. She appeared anxious, as if I were adding to her workload. You got there on time, right? Yeah. Right on time. She opened the door and appeared confused, as if I'd arrived for the wrong holiday. She stopped, then added. She also stated that there were no beds remaining. There was a backup excuse. She stated that they did not want me driving back late, but they also did not know where else to put me. So I left. Did someone offer to drive you home? Nope. I stared at her. Were you at least allowed to eat? Another shrug. The table was full. Maya sat in my customary seat. Grandpa spoke to her as if she were royalty. Nobody looked at me. Aunt Rachel nodded as Grandma added, "It's just a full house this year." So I left. She glanced at the table and said, "I made toast." I turned to see it. A single slice on a paper towel, cold and slightly curved. There's half a banana next to it. It was her Christmas supper. I felt a coil in my chest, not rage, not yet, just that cold, crystalline sensation before the shatter. I wasn't hungry anyway, she explained. Not really. That was when her eyes began to flood. She battled it. God, she tried. She looked up, blinked hard and bit her lip, as if she could chew her way out of the emotion. They made it seem like I'd imposed, she said quietly. Like showing up after it was planned was rude. And then she cried quietly and slowly, like a faucet that won't turn off. I was going to bring a pie, she said, but I thought they'd have enough food already. I sat next to her and placed my arm around her shoulders. She leaned forward without hesitation, as if she was supporting herself out of hate. After a time, she wiped her nose against her sleeve. I know they don't like you, she told me. But I thought. She cut herself off. You thought you were just the kid, not part of it. She nodded. They didn't even say it meanly, she explained. Just as if it was a practical matter. Like I was a folding chair that they didn't have room for. I did not go to bed right away. I sat in the kitchen, looking at her still zipped bag. She wrapped it so carefully, chose the clothing my mother mentioned she loved, and brought a small tin of cookies she prepared herself. I opened the refrigerator. There was nothing spectacular there. We had not prepared a backup Christmas. Why should we? We trusted them. That's the part I couldn't get over. Not the chili cheese toast, or the scarcity of food. Not to mention that she drove home alone in the dark. They looked her in the eyes. This sweet, uncomfortable, brave girl who arrived on time with cookies and a smile, and said with 28 people inside, "There's no room for you." They did not mean no room. They were referring to someone other than you. The next morning my spouse arrived home. Sophie was still sleeping. I informed him what had happened. He stood there for a long period before saying, "So, what do we do now?" I didn't respond. Not yet. But I already knew. Because there's turning the other cheek and then turning down a 16-year-old who simply wants to be included. They picked the latter. I didn't create a scene. I took action instead. The next morning, my parents discovered a note at their door and screamed. And began screaming. I don't recall the first time I was nicknamed the weird one, probably before I understood what the term meant. When I was 6, I discovered a dead bird and asked if I could dissect it. Not to be creepy, but I wanted to know how it worked. My mother smacked the kitchen counter and asked, "Jesus, Emma, what is wrong with you?" My sister Rachel screamed and informed everyone that I was attempting to build a zombie. I was grounded for scaring her. That kind of established the tone. I adored anatomy books, wanted a microscope for Christmas, and inquired about blood flow during supper. At school, I was the one who raised her hand. In my family, that was enough to get you dubbed a show-off. Nobody else attended college. Most did not complete high school on their first try. I was the only one who studied during the commercials. By the time I was 12, my father had started joking, half joking, that I wasn't really his. "Too smart to be mine," he'd say. Then he would laugh. I once overheard him arguing with my mother while they thought I was sleeping. He inquired whether she had ever cheated on him, saying he had always wondered because I didn't resemble anyone in the family. I didn't get much sleep that night. Never inquired about it. Still have not. By high school, Rachel had mastered her position as the golden kid. She was noisy, likable, average in school, and an expert at spinning every failure into a narrative. People adored her. She understood how to cry on cue and made it clear to everyone that she was looking out for me, the poor, awkward one who couldn't take jokes. She used to call me doctor, freak in front of others. She changed it to Dr. Moneybags after I became a doctor. So, progress. When I received the scholarship, the entire ride, my folks were unusually silent. There is no celebration, no hugs. My mother inquired as to whom I expected to marry, as men dislike women who appear to be wiser than they are. I told her I might marry myself. She did not laugh. They did not give me a penny. I waited tables in medical school, performed shifts no one wanted, and returned home with painful feet and burnout in my bones. Meanwhile, my family believed I was living a dream. They made no visits. Years later, following my second residency, I landed my first steady job, which made me feel like I wasn't drowning. My husband and I met during an overnight shift, very romantic if you consider shared tiredness charming, and finally relocated to a place where we could afford more than instant noodles. And that's when the calls began. Can you help with the electricity bill? Can you co-sign the lease? Can you speak with a doctor friend regarding Uncle Pete's back lump? I did everything I could, most of it without hesitation. When my parents approached retirement, far too soon and with little savings, I stepped in. They had never bought a home, always rented. Poor credit, terrible luck, or whatever the excuse of the year was. So I purchased a small 2-bedroom house and handed them the keys. I told them it was a gift, and that I would handle the mortgage. The house is in my name, yet they live there as if it was theirs. Rent-free. The majority of utilities are covered. Medical issues, I have insurance coverage. Yes, I have never said no, until recently. Rachel called some months ago. Maya, her daughter, the one who can do no wrong, had been admitted to a top STEM summer camp. Rachel said, "She's got your brain," as if it were a compliment. This could change her life. I inquired how much. $1,200, she explained, but it's worth it. And you, among all people. That's when I stopped listening. Sophie never attended a summer camp like that. Not because she couldn't, she never asked. She's practical and thoughtful. She wouldn't conceive of demanding that much money from me, even if she could have. I told Rachel no, respectfully but firmly. I explained that I was already financing our parents' mortgage, medical payments, and emergencies. Perhaps she could apply for financial aid or a payment plan. Her tone changed quickly. "Wow, must be good to have everything and still be so frugal. She's your niece. You're just jealous that Maya is achieving success." That last one was funny. Or would have been if I hadn't heard my mother say something similar a week later when she assumed I was out of earshot. Apparently, I was holding Maya back, just as I had always done with Rachel, by being the brilliant one who made everyone else look awful. You already know this since you exist. I didn't resist it, explain, or justify. I simply said no. And I intended it. This was 3 weeks before Christmas. Sophie was pleased to attend Christmas dinner and claimed she felt grown up being trusted to drive herself. She packed an overnight bag and even wrapped small gifts for her younger cousins. I told her I would see her in the morning and asked her to text me when she arrived. she did. Everything appeared perfect. Hours later, I walked through our front door and realized the fine had seemingly been canceled. Sophie looked up from the couch with a weak smile, saying, "Please pretend this isn't a disaster." She told me in the lowest voice that Grandma had said there was no space at the table or anywhere else, despite the fact that she counted 28 chairs in use. A math problem with a single variable. Her. I listened. I let her explanation bounce about the room like a dropped luggage. Then I placed my arms around her and let silence do the talking. She fell asleep still wearing the sweater she'd chosen to wow them. When the house had settled, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the area where her Christmas supper should have been. I repeated every mortgage payment, every energy bill, every Kuwaiti dinar that had gone permanent. They had not ran out of room, they had ran out of gratitude. And they had exploited my daughter to issue the memo. That was when the switch flipped. No more explanations. No more polite negotiations. I didn't even consider if I'd act. Just how soon. We didn't say anything during the way over. My husband sat alongside me in silence, his hand lightly resting on my knee, like a grounding wire. Not quite comfortable, but sturdy. Present. That was sufficient. The morning after Christmas is always strange, foggy, as if the world is still hung over from candy and wrapping paper. I was hoped that the house would be unoccupied. It was not. There were still 2 extra vehicles in the driveway. I recognized one as Rachel's. The other possibly belongs to the relative who lingered late for leftovers. We got out. I grasped the envelope tightly. I had not slept. The shift, the situation with Sophie, the cold dinner tray on the counter that hadn't been cleaned up, it was all buzzing in the back of my mind like a blown fuse. I rang the doorbell. Waited. No one arrived. I rang again. Knocked. Nothing. "Let's just leave it," my spouse said gently. I stood for a second longer and then nodded. We walked back to the car. I gently nestled the mail behind the doorframe so it wouldn't blow away. I was opening the driver's side door when I heard it. A creak in the screen, a slippered footstep. I turned. My mother strolled out, wrapped in one of those fuzzy robes she always wore around the holidays, the ones she used to brag about obtaining at 90% off. She bent down, picked up the letter, opened it, and began reading. Her expression turned blank, then pale. Then she shouted, "David!" Her voice crackled like a broken wire. "David, get away of here, she is throwing us out." My father appeared at the door dressed in the clothing he wore yesterday. "What the hell?" Rachel followed, still dressed in her Christmas jammies and cradling a mug, as if she expected a nice morning. "What is going on?" My mother turned and pointed down the driveway as if I were a stray animal who had just urinated on her porch. "You ungrateful little—" We hopped in the car and drove away before I could hear the entire sentence. It didn't matter. I know the best hits. My phone was already vibrating when we arrived home. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again, and again. The 6th time, I picked up. "How dare you!" my mother shrieked. There was no hello, no pause, and no attempt to show sympathy for Sophie. "You've lost your damn mind." I held the phone away from my ear. I could still hear my father yelling in the background. "If you do this, you're no daughter of ours," he yelled. They did not ask why. They made no inquiry into what had occurred. They did not even mention Sophie, not once. I hung up. They kept phoning. Rachel began texting. I believe one message literally stated, "This will ruin your reputation. Think about your career." Oh honey. My patients do not care where my parents live. By the evening, my phone appeared to have gone through a breakup. 32 missed calls, 14 messages, and 3 voicemails. One cousin even had the courage to message, "This is not my place, but it feels extreme. You only have one mom." I did not respond to any of them. The next morning there was a knock on the door. I peeked through the peephole. Of course it's my mother. She was standing on my porch in the same fuzzy robe, carrying the eviction letter, which was wrinkled and moist from being squeezed for 2 hours. I opened the door but did not welcome her inside. She did not wait. "Are you really doing this?" she hissed. "After what we've done for you?" I let that sit for a moment. Then I gently asked, "You mean the house I bought for you? Which bills did I pay? I arranged for health insurance because your Medicare did not cover your blood pressure medications." She flinched for milliseconds. Then she straightened, her gaze sharp. "We reared you. We gave you everything. You didn't even let my daughter eat dinner, I replied. That temporarily stopped her. But she recovered quickly. Do not be theatrical. We did not have enough chairs. There were 28 people there, I explained. Even a neighbor. Her lips were squeezed tight. I didn't send that letter to be cruel, I clarified. But if you think you can treat Sophie like she's disposable. Oh, for God's sake, she exclaimed, suddenly enthusiastic again. Stop acting as if we are monsters. You are the one pulling your family apart due to a misunderstanding. And now you're threatening your parents. She held up the letter as if it were evidence in a trial. Then, and I swear, this seemed like theatrical, she ripped it in half. Just stood there and tore it down the middle, as if it would nullify the judicial process. There, she said. That's finished. Now, if you want us to forgive you, pay for Maya's science camp and stop throwing this foolish tantrum. She smiled, as if she had just fixed everything. I didn't say anything because I sensed they weren't taking me seriously. Not for 1 second. Not when I was a child. Not when I became a physician. Not even now. To them, I was still the awkward, science-obsessed girl who should be grateful for scraps and keep her place. The girl they despised but never truly admired. They assumed I wouldn't follow through. But they were mistaken. So I let my mother stroll off the porch, muttering to herself like the hero of a sad play. And I closed the door quietly and calmly. But in my mind, I was already planning the next step. My mother ripped up the eviction letter in front of me, as if it were a gutter-cleaning flyer, after accusing me of being selfish, loveless, and emotionally unstable. Then she mustered the courage to grin and said, "Pay for Maya's science camp and we'll forgive you." She answered, "We will forgive you." As if they were the victims. Turning away my kid for Christmas was a failure in decorum rather than cruelty. 2 mornings later, I met with an attorney. I listed everything. The house in my name, the mortgage I had been paying for 7 years, the bills, the dental plan, and the quiet sacrifices. He did not flinch. "I assume you want a formal eviction," he replied, as if it were the weather. I nodded. The warning was sent out that same week, 60 days, paper stamped, signature obtained. And this time, they couldn't just take it up and pretend it didn't exist. I maintained paying the mortgage. I wasn't going to let my credit suffer for the sake of a statement, but everything else? Gone. Utilities. Cable. Medical reimbursement. They received a crash tutorial in what no support looks like. 2 weeks later, somebody knocked on my door. It was Aunt Laura. I thought she was a good aunt. She brought a tin of cookies and a practiced expression of worry. "Katie," she answered. "I just want to talk." I allowed her inside. I already understood why she was there. We sat in the kitchen. I poured tea. Neither of us touched it. "It just doesn't sound like you," she explained. "Throwing out your parents over a misunderstanding," she continued gently. I laughed once, not gently. I informed her about the house, the expenses, and the Christmas Eve treachery. How my parents had accommodated 28 individuals, including a neighbor and 2 cousins I hadn't spoken with in a decade, but not their own granddaughter. Aunt Laura paled. "I didn't know," she replied. "They didn't tell you," I explained. She walked away as if she couldn't stop thinking about what she had heard. 3 days later, I received an SMS that I had not previously understood. I do now. 1 week before the deadline, my lawyer called. "They haven't moved at all," he explained. "Then we proceed," I said. I listed the house the same day. Set a reasonable price, not too expensive. I wasn't aiming to maximize value. I simply wanted it to be over. A buyer made a bid quickly. Families enjoy that area. They simply wanted it empty. "Vacant possession is required," my representative reminded me. "Noted," I said. I did not go the day they were removed. The new owners handled the situation legally. I heard it was not pretty, but what happened next was not better. Rachel took them in. Of course she did. My sister used to cosplay as the better daughter. She conducted interviews with cousins as if it were a publicity tour. "She's abandoning them," she remarked, all because of one holiday mishap. 3 weeks later, she showed up at my door, her eyes bloodshot and her hair in a frizzy bun. "I can't do it," she said, not even saying hi. "They are continuously fighting. Mom believes the living room is too small. Dad claims that my children are noisy. They refuse to share the bathroom. I am going insane." I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. "They need a rental," she explained. "You could at least assist with that. Just enough for a deposit." "No, Emma. On Christmas Eve you stood there and watched as she was sent away. That was your decision. This is mine. She blinked, then turned to walk away. A week later, she also kicked them out. They ended up in a rental that no one would recommend, 2 rooms, 1 heating, and a front step that tilted like a shrug. Their pension barely covered the rent and groceries. Gone were the trips, dinner parties, and cruise they had planned for their anniversary. They tried to elicit sympathy from the extended family. I said I had cut them off without warning, that I was unstable, that I had always been cold. But by then, I had quietly chatted with the uncles and cousins. I sent them documents of the invoices I had paid. I forwarded the eviction letter, which was time-stamped and certified. One cousin simply said, "Wow." Another person sent a thumbs-up emoji. The family didn't rush to save them, and neither was I. 2 months later, Sophie and I were sitting on the porch, sipping iced tea. No plans, no performance, just a relaxing afternoon. She remarked, "I don't miss them, you know." I didn't either. My phone vibrated. Unknown number. I opened it reflexively. "I hope you are proud of what you have accomplished." I removed it. No pause. There's no breath. "They'll probably text again," Sophie replied casually. "They always do," I explained. "But they're not my problem anymore." And they were not. They told Sophie there was no room at the table. There's no more room in our lives for cruelty, control, or manipulation. Fast forward 2 years. They're still in that dilapidated rental, still blaming everyone except themselves. Sophie is prospering now. She's studying what she enjoys. And the proceeds from the sale of the house paid for more than simply tuition. They also provided her with peace of mind. Me? A small amount of closure. I do not answer their calls. I do not send money. I don't lose sleep. I protected my daughter. I chose her. Finally. But tell me, have I gone too far? Or just far enough?